You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you're listening to another episode of Leadership Powered by Common Sense. I'm excited for a guest today that is going to help us look at stages of growth in business and things that owners and founders can do to be prepared to make the transitions that might be going on. And he happens to have a great background also in people development, people assessment, and placement. His name is Rico Pena. Rico, welcome to the show.
Hey, Doug. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yes, and happy to have you here. It's a little bit of a tradition on the show here, Rico, I ask my guests to give us just a quick overview of kind of your journey and background that got you into the things you're doing today.
Absolutely. First, was in the military, so a lot of my behavior analysis and interest in behavior in the workplace started in the military. That's how I was taught, and I brought a lot of that lesson into the civilian world. But I really didn't get into this business until I had a teenage daughter in middle school. And if you've ever had one of those, you understand, I don't care how good you are at communication or body language or any of that, it is a complete foreign language. And that's when I started to understand how to use data, assessments, reports, and getting a better understanding of each other. And very quickly, I was able to relate with my daughter to this day. She's now in her 30s, to be able to utilize that. And that just a light bulb went off. If I can do that in this personal, challenging situation, can you imagine how we could do that in the workplace, which you spend so much time with the same kind of people in the office? And so that started my journey of putting together data and information about human behavior, about the workplace behavior and culture, and how do we utilize that to make meaningful connections that improves team performance or leadership styles, especially those middle managers who just got promoted because of their skills, and now they're expected to do great things because they have the potential. So that became a really strong passion for us of how do we help organizations have better people, hire better people, because look at today, the workplace has changed. So that's where we are. That's what we do. We've done it with large Fortune 500 companies from all around the world to those small and medium-sized companies, founders and startups, because at the end of the day, the common denominator of any success or workplace is the people in it.
Amen. Amen. Well, not to get sidetracked, but you piqued my curiosity. What kind of data can you collect on a teenage daughter?
Right?
Make better decisions.
That's what intrigued me the most. The information that we use or the reports that we use are based on brainwave technology. And it's a company that decided, there's so many of these assessments around the world, but what can scientifically be proven? So by putting fMRIs and CAT scans and brainwave, they were able to determine through exhaustive tests, is a particular temperament or an environment or conversational style, can it affect different people in the same way or different? And they were able to create an algorithm that is extremely detailed. And the analyst who did the assessment of my daughter and myself immediately told me what the problem was, because she wants a sounding board. She's very relational, a little drama queen. The world's falling. Everyone hates me, that kind of thing. In my mind, I'm going, well, if you stop doing this, this wouldn't happen. And the moment you were able to show me these two graphs and how they interact, it clicked. And it was just as simple as don't react, slow down, and just listen. All she wants is a sounding board. And immediately our conversations changed. But I had to consciously understand what she needed from me and what I needed to adapt. And that's what the data was able to surmise is pace, the topic of conversation, what motivates this person. Just on 24 questions, it's quite freaky and eerie as how much I could get out of this. But it was as a game changer. It was an absolute game changer. And that was close to 20 years ago. It's evolved even more now as how much information we can get just from your answers.
That's amazing. And, a couple things you touched on there remind me back in the day, as I was coming up through parenting my kids in their early years, late teens and early 20s. There was a popular book, Gary Smalley, I think, did it, The Five Love Languages.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was that idea that, just because you're thinking one way and your communication style is a certain way, that doesn't always work for in using Gary's model. I think it was Gary. I think that's right. Four other modalities that are surrounding you in the world that you're going to run into. And that means you're going to be wrong 4 out of 5 times.
Right. Exactly.
Plow through it with your mode, your MO. So as a leader, and bringing that back to our topic here, as a leader, I think it's definitely important to understand that dynamic, that just because you've set the course for where you want the business and the team to be going, the way you communicate it to get the best results needs to flex, shift, be adaptable. And for a lot of leaders out there, people that have moved into management, as you said, because they just got recognized for good performance, that's not a thing they've been prepared to do.
No, and we see that unfortunately more and more. And so now imagine you have someone, say, in sales, and they're very good at selling that one thing, and that's why they got recognized. Well, what does leadership want? We want more of you and what you do. So we're going to promote you to now manage the people selling the same thing you are selling, but now we need you to use those skills. Well, the only thing that person has to reflect back to or have any ways, I want you to do what I did. Well, that doesn't mean everyone can do that. If so, everybody would already be doing it. So they're not given the skill sets of how to manage people or manage to a performance. So the only thing they have to measure is outcomes, the number, the goals, the quota, and not the people. So they're not given enough people skills. And that's true to any leadership. We only lead or communicate or make decisions based on our perspective, our 5 senses, and our experiences. We don't really know the other person. So you could be looking at the exact same situation, 2 people, and have a complete different outcome because they're bringing their experiences, their 5 senses. It's more about perception. What leaders need to be better at is cultivating perspective. Perception is based on what we see, what we feel, what's relatable to us. Perspective is not just taking that, but looking at all the other data points and asking better questions so you can get a bigger picture and communicate more effectively.
Yeah, that is so powerful. And I have spoken about the complexities of communication and the layers that I have observed and argue are key elements in leadership communication. And usually when I start talking with a client about communication, they immediately go to, well, it's a two-way street. Well, yes, in terms of physical proximity, 2 people talking, but the dynamic and the mechanics of it, actually, I present the idea that it's staged in 4 different elements, and any of them can break down at any time.
Correct.
So it's incumbent on the leader to work it, and I'll go through them real quick. Number 1 is the idea itself. You're the leader. You've got a message you want to send out. You think about it a while, and then you begin communicating it. And how often have we said, "Oh, that didn't come out the way I meant it to"?
Mm-hmm.
That's step number 1.
Yeah.
So that's a potential fail right there. Step number 2 is the message itself. What do you pack into it? What words do you use? What tone do you use? What emphasis do you put on different elements? That all can end up getting mixed up and confusing. But number 3 goes over to the receiver's side, and they have a kind of a filter that a word you might have chosen to pack into your message could be a trigger word for them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And, lastly, the 4th step is the way they process what they think they've heard. So the 3rd step is their filter that's going to give them a read on what they think they've heard. Now they still have to process it, and that may trigger other things and create other outcomes. I'll give a real quick example on the listener side. What I'm talking about, when my wife and I first got married, we were, classic. We were kind of learning each other and little nuances now that we were living together permanently. And one day I was talking about something else, not her. I was not talking about her or something she had done. I was talking about something totally outside the house. And I said, "That's just stupid." And she froze.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at her and I said, "What did I say? What's wrong?" She said, "Stupid's not a word we can use." I said, "I'm sorry, what?" And she said, "At my house growing up, we got in trouble if we ever called anything or anybody stupid." And I went, "Oh, okay. Well, my apologies." But see, that was
Right.
a trigger word. In my experience, stupid wasn't a bad word. It helped, I thought, communicate an opinion or an idea. It's certainly not flattering. I get that. But anyway, I realized, well, put that on the list. That's a trigger word. And I love my wife. I don't want to accidentally impact her in a wrong way. So I'll be better about whether or not I use that word. Now, as we've come together, I guess I've influenced her in a bad way. She's more prone to use that word now than she ever used to be. But
But she feels safe now, right?
we
There's
don't
no
talk about it a
repercussions.
lot. But yeah, I accept it. It's like, sometimes you run into things and that just seem stupid. And so anyway, but yeah, let's get a little more into the work you're talking about, Rico. You were telling me in the green room you do some work helping companies with alignment of their personnel evaluation and kind of deployment, or just
Correct. Yeah.
explain that for me.
What I find, whether you are a Fortune 500 company or a startup, the biggest challenge is, do I have the right people doing the right things? And what does that mean? When you look at when you're hiring someone, what's the first thing that most people do? They put a job description or decide, these are the skills or experience that I need to be able to do this job. You go into an interview, looks good, sounds good, you hire them, and 6 months to a year later, they don't work out or they quit. Well, when we looked at our research, the reason it didn't work out or they quit had nothing to do with this skill set and everything to do with the interaction of the leader, the culture, or the team. So it's a people to people issue. And the big reason for that is the role, the culture, and the leadership style was never taken in consideration in the job description or hiring and interview process. So you're throwing someone new into an established situation that may or may not fit. And as human and as tribal creatures that we are, if that doesn't feel right or I don't feel safe, then I'm not going to work at 100%. I'm going to constantly be looking for something else or disrupt the process to fit my needs. And as organizations grow and you add more people, the more complex that culture becomes. But most organizations don't think that that is part of their growth process and don't prepare for it. So there was a research done for almost 50 years of different companies that were similar, and to determine why did some companies thrive and succeed while others didn't fail. And one of the starting of that research was the book Good to Great. Well, someone took that and took it even further. And the common denominator was the number of people you have at each stage. So if you have 0 to 10, there should be supposed to be a certain type of leadership, a certain type of focus, which is getting the product out there, understanding the systems, things of that nature. And as you grow, you are putting in systems because you know what the next stage needs. Any organization that's had turnover did not prepare for the next stage. They hit a ceiling and they go back 2 or 3 stages. And at the end, the most reason for that is people. Look at what's happened after the pandemic. The way we work has changed. Mm-hmm. The way companies decide whether to do remote or not. I just read an article that big, large corporations that were telling people you have to come into the office was really a way to start to eliminate positions because they found it more cost effective or they were automating jobs. Well, if you look at how people are thinking about remote work and the advantages to that, well, of course, a percentage is going to say, I'm not coming in, I'm going to find a different job. So we have to understand the human dynamics. The person that you hired that's been with you for 10 years at age 20 and now is married with a child at age 30, their value of the job and what they need for the job is totally different than when you hired them. And as leaders, if we don't start to pay attention to our growth of our organization as it pertains to our people, especially at the speed that things are moving today, you're going to struggle, whether it's a remote, whether it's technology, whatever it may be. So we were able to identify, where are you in stages just based on the number of people? What do you need to have in place so you're not only thriving in that stage, but you're preparing for the second stage, as well as what is the role need to thrive within those stages? And then how do we find people that fit not just the skill, but the culture, the team, the leadership, and if you're customer facing, that type of customer. So it really enhances the quality. And that's, once you have that, it's a lot easier to determine, how do we train them? How do we keep their skills up? What's the culture that thrives for them? And it's very easy to determine who's that toxic person we need to either move to a different position or remove from the organization.
So a couple of things I think I heard you say there, and I'll try to unpack it as best I can. There are some schools of thought that suggest, I will say, I know this is referenced in Gino Wickman's EOS book for small business. There's the notion of building an organization chart based on the functions you need, not the people you have. You know, to design and optimize your business, you need to start with that view of, what do I really need to make this business thrive? And let's draw the boxes for that on my org chart. And that ultimately, yes, drives to some notion of a job description. But it's more important to center on, basically, to say it another way, the value that position is going to add to the company.
Correct.
And if you can define that, then you can start this idea of going to market and seek the right fit. The other thing you alluded to that I've certainly been a believer of, and I've watched it play out in many ways, is when all things are said and done, it's better to hire for behavior that will be a fit to what you know you have going on than it is to hire for skill that you think you need.
Absolutely. And we've seen it over and over and over again. Behavior, character, drive, the things that are innate, something that you can't teach. Skill can be taught. If you have a good 90-day onboarding or process or training mechanism, skill can be taught, because that person is willing, if they're driven, if they have great integrity and character, a student mindset, they're going to learn it. You know, and even though there are some, as we see in our science, there are certain positions that don't align really well to some temperaments. For example, if you have someone who's really outgoing, loves being around people, can connect with anyone, and you take that person, you put them in a cubicle doing nothing but administrative work, it doesn't mean they couldn't do it. But it's like a battery. It's going to drain. You're not going to do the job at the highest level because it doesn't naturally align to who they are. And I think that's the missing piece as we're looking at remote, as we're looking at quiet quitting, and we're looking at all of these, how do we bring technology with people? It is more apparent than ever today to truly identify the skill and the position that's needed. But what is the right person that sees and does that job naturally? You're going to get so much more joy, so much, and then how to manage that, right? So there's a lot of different variables that we've learned to understand that when you align it, it thrives.
You know, I've heard it described. I had a guest on my show last year that talked about operating in the genius zone, was the word she had used for it. And what that means is, as you've alluded, it's the idea of identifying for every one of your people what their optimum capacity is, passion, interest, thrive. You mentioned the outgoing versus very mundane administrative work. Well, if you can find a genius zone person that really thrives with that administrative detail and minutia, you've got a rock star to put on the team. because every company needs a little bit of that, right? You need a little bit of that administrative stuff to keep it moving. And finding the right person that just thrives in being able to dive into a mountain of paperwork.
And enjoys it, right? They love that. That's their love language, as you alluded to before.
Right.
They're gonna be not only loyal, but they're going to be creative. They're going to find new ways to do that because you're giving them something that they already naturally are good at doing, and that's where I see where science has evolved. We can identify that once we understand this position is a highly technical, very administrative. It's going to require someone who truly enjoys research and taking complex programs and putting them into something simple for the consumer to understand. Believe it or not, we can identify those characteristics in an individual. So that way you're already starting with someone who has a natural aptitude and desire for the key non-negotiables for that role to be able to provide the services to the industry.
Yeah. Well, you also touched on this idea of the evolution of the business and the stages they're going to go through. I want to get into that a little bit more, but the first thought along that path, I'm speaking to my smaller business owner founders who are facing the sense that the business is changing, the dynamic is changing, and they're searching for ways to ride the wave, so to speak, or take it to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
Often what I observe is people, as they do start a business, they often make some choices about staff.
Right.
Sometimes it's friends and family because they're available, they're willing, they're cheap. I shouldn't say cheap. Let's say inexpensive.
Right.
So you ingrain them into the effort, and you do in fact create some level of success. But as the business evolves and matures, maybe that person doesn't have the fit for that role anymore. So that becomes your first giant challenge as the founder to say, hey, Uncle Bob,
Yeah.
hey, Cousin Sally, we can't do this anymore. Thank you for everything you've done for me, but I need to go another direction. That's a very, very hard call to make, and it kind of screws up Thanksgiving forevermore.
Yeah. Thanksgiving won't be the same, or Christmas, or any of those holidays. And it's interesting, if you really have these processes in place, those conversations not only happen naturally, but that individual recognizes that what's required, they can no longer provide. So they self-select out for the most part. Because what the requirement is, they can no longer provide. And if you have higher standards, KPIs and processes, then they're going to recognize I'm not meeting those, as long as they're held fairly across the board. And I always tell any startup, the people you started with today are not the people who are going to take you for the next 5 years. So as you hire through phases, you're always thinking, is this person for the next 3 years, for the next 5 years? What level of expertise? Because as you grow and you add more people, you need better specialists in different departments. When you start out, you need generalists. You're just sort of getting things started. And that's why you get to a point where you recognize, now I need a specialist in marketing, a COO, I need a sales director, because they can shorten the learning curve but accelerate the growth based on their experience, as long as they fit the culture, the mission, and the vision of the organization.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I always advise people that are trying to run and operate a smaller business that might be on a growth curve in a positive way, when they are looking at the next level. For instance, I had a CEO once that said, I'm hovering at about 3 million topside revenue. I really think we can jump to 10 because of everything we've got in motion. But I'm concerned, I'll need a new ops manager, I'll need a new sales director to get me there. And he started showing me some resumes of people that he was entertaining for those roles. And I said, none of these fit. And he goes, sure they do. They're all good. And I said, no, they're all familiar with $3 million size companies.
Exactly.
You want to go to 10, find a guy that's at 10 already.
Right.
let him show you how to get to 10.
And that's such a powerful thing, Doug, that most founders, even organizations, don't recognize it. That's because they're looking at skill. They're not looking at past performance, predictable performance, because they've been there. They've already done that road. But at the same time, just because they have that level of experience, are they going to add value or disrupt my existing culture? And there's got to be a balance there. Because you can bring on someone who's really, really good that completely disseminates your entire team, your entire culture, because the way they do and they get there doesn't align to the people you have. So either A, you're going to have to change everyone, or B, find someone that, pushes your team, pushes your organization, but in a manner that doesn't disrupt what you've already built. And there are going to be people that will turn over, which need it to be, unfortunately. I always tell business owners, before you eliminate, see if there's a different position that with reskilling, they will thrive in. Because they've given you 3, 4, 5, 8 years. So obviously there's a value. If you can't see they go to the next level, with that next level, is there any other opportunity based on what we know that with a little bit of training, they're able to continue to add value to the organization?
Perfect. Well, Rico, when we were in the green room, we were talking a little bit about a study that you referred to that describes 7 stages of company growth. For the time we've got left here, would you mind kind of walking us through what those stages are that owners and founders ought to be knowing?
Absolutely. So the first one, and actually, so that way I don't screw it up, I'm going to look at my sheets right here.
Please, yes.
So I make sure I give everyone the right thing. So the first one is that startup stage. And that's where, like it says, you're starting with an idea, a concept, things of that nature. And there are usually 1 to 10 employees on there, right? So you have an idea and a concept, you're starting into the market, everyone's wearing multiple hats at that point. And the focus for the leaders there is just to be that entrepreneur, that founder, that visionary to continue to grow, right? You're still developing the hows and the whats. The stage 2 is the ramp up stage. And typically there's 11 to 19 employees there. So now your CEO, your founder is now thinking about systems and processes. The leaders that have ramped up are now starting to train that next level, and you're focusing on their singular product. You have understood your process and procedures, and now you're looking at your target audience. And again, as you start growing, because the demand's there. Stage 3 is all about the delegation stage. And that's why stage 1 and 2 are so important. Your leaders and managers have learned the process in that ramp up stage, created SOPs. This is also how you understand who to hire. And now you're delegating to those new leaders because they now have the group underneath, the employees, and making sure that those standards are being held. And that is usually 20 to 34 employees. The leadership style is now back to visionary. Now that we're having handled what does the next stages look like, here's also where you start looking for your CEOs, your CFOs. You start to build. You haven't quite gotten there. You're starting to build your executive team. Then the next stage, which is stage number 4, is your professional stage. This is now that you have your executive team, you have your directors, your managers, the process, the system is moving more efficiently. You're at that 35 to 57 employees, typically anywhere between that 8 to 15, maybe even $25 million type of revenue stream, because now you have departments, complexity, that leader is still focusing on process systems and elevation, because you're now having to decide, are we expanding or are we selling? So this is typically one of those first decisions there. Now stage 5, we start getting into the big boys. This is where your Fortune 500 start to play in. This is the integration stage, 58 to 95 employees. And this is an important stage because now you have grown in such a way that you have to start thinking strategic. You're having to think about how do we integrate all of these nuances that we've learned. And if you're deciding to expand like a franchise, what does that look like? If you're going to sell, how do we increase our valuation? So now you're starting to think about more strategically. Stage 6 is that integration stage, that strategic stage. Depending on the decision, how are we executing? You've taken the time to plan that. And that's typically that 96 to 160 employees. This is when you start seeing companies offering different major products and brands around the world, and different executive teams and branches around it. The top stage is where you see your massive global is your visionary stage. Now what I do, this is where Apple was. Now, how do we create products and systems that are transformational? And you now have a much larger population, 161 to 350 employees. These are these massive global organizations that have quite a different departments, products, and services. Now you're more back to visionary. What are we doing to now be more transformational in the global marketplace? So as you can see, the common denominator are those numbers of people and their requirements to move that idea forward. And what ends up happening is most organizations don't realize they're going through this and all the challenges and where the focus of leadership and as a founder, where you should be, when are you supposed to let go and give other people responsibilities. But once you understand that, and we have analysis that we can do that says, here's where you are, here's what you need to prepare. Now you have a more organized element into decision making as to how do I do what I need to do with the people, with my idea, with my systems, and not fall back into stage 1 or 2 because you've lost people, you lost market share, and lost revenue.
Yeah. And when you look at the landscape and history of small business growth and evolution, there's a huge, I don't know what the real numbers are, but there aren't that many that start from the literal garage band kind of
Right.
like a Hewlett Packard all the way up to a global giant.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers just don't support that's everybody's destiny.
Right.
Instead, what usually happens is owner-founders get up to some level of complexity and revenue, and they look around and go, this is good. I'm okay with this.
Right.
So I call it, the word I use for it is they've created a lifestyle business. The business is generating some wealth for them personally and hopefully for others on the team. But they're comfortable with that. They kind of do this, I ask myself the question, how much is enough? This is it.
Exactly.
Maybe we do have 25 people and we've got a $10 million topside revenue and a $3 million margin. Well, that's some nice cash that you can spread around with people.
Mm-hmm.
And my point is there's nothing wrong with making that choice. The one caveat, and the reason I wanted to have this discussion is for those owners that think they want to stay on the journey to move as far forward, as big and as fast as they can, and maybe they are driving for that cash out payday kind of idea. Maybe they're not going to be the next Apple or they're not going to be the next Google, but they could get to $100 million business and then find a buyer and take their payday then. There are still some critical mind shifts that the owner-founder is going to have to make, and we were touching on this in the green room. In my banking days, I watched far too many owners kind of hit an invisible wall where they weren't willing to make the mind shift that it was going to require of them to be able to propel the business to the next level.
And it still happens today. I was just recently with a client, as I was telling you, that wanted to grow through franchise. And they had a great product, great reputation. They've been around for almost 20 years. But the founder is still somewhat in charge. And what I want, if you're a founder or you've started your own business, the one thing I want you to really focus on is the fact that when you had the idea and the growth to where you are today, the market has changed, your employees have changed. And no employee that you hire is going to have the same passion and drive as you do. So the expectations have to adjust. And if you don't adjust with the market or realistic with why and how you want to get to that $100 million valuation, then make the decision to stay where you are. And that's what happened with this founder. They wanted to grow to that 100 million. They actually had the capacity, but the pain of change from what he was comfortable to what was necessary in today's market to get there, they didn't want to. So what did they do? They eliminate the people that were against that, and they thought they could do what they needed to do within their comfort zone. They didn't want to leave the positions of authority or the revenue that they were already generating, even though with a little bit of sacrifice, it would have been 3, 4, or 5, right? So the culture that you create, especially as a founder, can help dictate what the next steps are. But be very clear. If your intent, and this could change at any time, but if your intent is to let's grow it to sell it, that is a different strategy than let's grow it and expand.
Right.
And yeah, you can hit a crossroad and change, but if you change, as Doug was saying, you need to also adjust your mindset. You may not have the skills and ability to reach that milestone. So what is most important? And if you don't let go as you grow, you'll always be that middle-sized mom and pop stores, and that's okay. But at least be realistic, because you have employees that are also trying to make a living. They have their own legacy and their dreams and aspirations, that if you're telling we're going to be a $100 million business, but preventing that because of your fears, concerns, or your comfort zone, then you are doing a disservice to those employees, and hence why you have turnover.
Right. So totally true. And I have seen it play out. Some of the most difficult but wise and beneficial decisions I have seen, what I like to call more enlightened founders do, is they will get to a place in the journey and they'll say, you know what, I need to hire a CEO or I need to hire a COO to run this business.
Correct.
Because I sense that I've reached my lid. I'm capped. I've still got the vision. I've still got the vision of what I'd like to do, but I've spent everything that I know emotionally and intellectually. I've spent everything I've got. I got to bring somebody that knows how to do this.
Exactly.
I had on a show also last year who told the story of he and two partners created a restaurant chain out in California, and they created a very successful chain, but they were getting some traction and expanding locations. And then all of a sudden, it got really hard to do for them. The three of them together, they had three heads at the table. They still couldn't figure out some of the things they needed to do next. So they collectively agreed, hey, we each have our zone of genius for this business, but we're not CEOs at this level. So they brought in a guy, extensive, exhaustive interview process, but they found a guy that could embrace the culture they had built. And the culture they had built was a big part of it. You know, they wanted to provide good food at a reasonable price so that families would come back and back.
Got it. Yeah.
And it was all about some culture and service that differentiated them from the 1,000 other restaurant brands that are out there. Found a CEO that could embrace that and perpetuate it, and they rocketed up to $100 million before they sold out.
There you go. And again, it's something what you said, because of that culture, that service, what they've created. And if that CEO did not fit that, it would have completely disrupted that entire reason why they were successful. Right. And that's a really important part.
So totally true. Well, Rico, I think we're about up on time for today, man. Thank you for sitting in. I really appreciate you sharing what you've got.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me, and to your guests for listening. And I hope to come back at some point in time.
You bet. Well, I always ask my guests to tell the people how they can get a hold of you if they're interested in learning more.
Absolutely. You can reach out to me at my company, q.inc.com. That's our website. We're all over Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook under Q. Behavioral Dynamic Resources. Reach out. We're happy to help. And if you mention that you are part of Doug's group, then we'll make sure to take care of you even more.
Oh, thank you, Rico. And as always, folks, we're going to have those links in the show notes. So feel free to hop down, check out the link, and you can go direct and reach out to Rico to learn what you might want to know about helping your business or your own leadership. And I also want to remind you, if you're listening on your favorite streaming service, we do have a video version of this over on YouTube, channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hop over there, check out the archives, and you can look back on some of the shows I referenced, and look forward to seeing you on the next episode. For now, we're going to sign off, say goodbye, go out there, make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.